Welcome back from the break. I hope you managed to stretch your legs. Okay, let's have a look at the next section of our work. Okay, so we're now going to have a look at our lines of evidence, and we're going to have a look specifically at the different human ancestors and the evolution. All right, so the first species that we need to look at is called Artificus Remedus. And what is important here is that you need to know the names of certain of these, well, actually all of them, but what you need to know is there's some detail, and what you'll see on some of the slides, there's a star that's been placed, and those species specifically, because they are quite sort of relevant for South Africa, for us, and they were discovered in South Africa. They are then starred, they are important, and examiners will use those examples to test you on. So you need to know the names and the genus and the species of the organism. You need to know where they were found. You need to know which scientist found them, and then you need to know a little bit about their characteristics. Okay, so let's have a look at the slide. Okay, so the first one is Artificus Remedus. We call him Ardi for short, and Ardi means ground, and Pithecus means ape, and Remed means roots. So that's where we got his name from. And they were discovered and it was found that they lived about 4 to 5 million years ago in Ethiopia. So they are in Africa. They were discovered by Tim White, and they have a very small brain capacity. So there you can see they only have between 300 and 350 cubic centimeters or milliliters. And their jaw is more prognathous. So if you have a look here at the diagram, you can see they've got, it's a much smaller cranium, and then their jaw is also still quite prognathous, which means it sticks out, protrudes quite far. So they've got a pointed face, and they have a very poorly developed chin. They also still have a grasping big toe, and that is because they still lived in trees, or they used trees to, as part of their habitat, and so they were able to then swing from branch to branch. Okay, and their skeleton was adapted for bipedalism as well, so the pelvis was shorter and broader than the ape counterparts. Right, then the next species we're going to have a look at is called Australopithecus Amensis, and it means southern apes, and they were found in the lake area. They lived about 4.2 to 3.8 million years ago. They were also found in Eastern Africa. They were found by Mary Leakey in Kenya. Their brain size is also quite small, only 370 cc's. So you can see again the cranium, it's quite flat. So that is an indication that they had a small brain. They also were bipedal, so they walked upright. Their ankle bone is pretty similar to that of humans, but they had long arms, and wrist bones indicate that they still used to climb in trees. Right, then the next species that we're going to have a look at, Australopithecus afarensis, or we call the fossil has a nickname. Her name is Lucy. She lived about 3.9 to 2.8 million years ago, and was found in the region called Letoli in Tanzania. She was found by Donald Johanson. Her average brain capacity is about 430 cubic centimeters. So you can see it's slightly larger, but it's still not as developed as, or as large as later Homo species. They had a pronounced brow ridge. So here you can see this is the brow ridge if you look on the diagram, and you can see the brows are quite distinct. Even in this diagram you can see there's quite distinct brow ridges, which is still characteristics of apes. They had quite a sloping forehead, and there you can see So we talk about a sloping forehead, so it goes in that direction, and that's because the jaw is still quite prognathous. Okay, so they had a flat nose, there was no chin, they were fully bipedal, so the foramen magnum was in a more forward position. Canines were also small, and they had long arms with curved fingers. Right, then Australopithecus africanus. Okay, and there you can see our star. This is a very important one. You need to study, you need to know all the features. They were discovered, it was discovered that they lived 3.2 to 2.1 million years ago. The face was prognathous, the jaw was prognathous. They had human-like teeth, so they were more human-like. They had a flatter face, also long arms. The average brain size was 428 to 625 cubic centimeters. The foramen magnum was in a more forward position, which was an indication that they were bipedal. Examples are, and these are important, you need to know these examples, the Taung child, and that was found by Raymond Dart specifically in Taung. Mrs. Pless, this is another example, was found by Robert Broom, and then Littlefoot was found by Ron Clark. And yeah, so here if you can have a look and see, we've got a slightly larger cranium because we said that the brain capacity became a little bit more, it was a bit larger. All right, then we're going to have a look at Australopithecus sadiba. And again here you can see we have a star, so this is another important one. She's named Karabu. They named her, that's her nickname if you like, and they discovered that this species lived about 1.95 million years ago. They had characteristics of both apes and humans, and they were found near the caves in Malapa in South Africa. Okay, and the fact that they had characteristics that were both human and apes means that they regarded as a transitional species. And remember when we spoke earlier about transitional species, we said that they have characteristics, so they're usually in the middle and they have characteristics of the species before them, the ancestor species, and the one that comes later. They were discovered, or she was discovered by Lee Berger and Brett Eloff. And here we can see the brain size is also not very big. So it's 420 to 450 mils. So you can see that, again, there's not very much of a forehead there. They were also bipedal. They had small molars and long arms. So there you can see some of the characteristics that are human, and yet the brain size is smaller, which is it's a characteristic more of other primates. Okay, so the next group of organisms we're going to have a look at is Homo, and we're specifically going to look here at Homo habilis. His nickname was Handy Man, and that was because he was the first where they found evidence of a species using tools and weapons and had ornaments and those kind of things. So they lived about 2.4 to 1.4 million years ago, and they were found, our fossils were found in Tanzania by Mary and Louis Leakey. They discovered them. What they found is they have a less pronounced brow ridges, they have more human-like teeth, they have a flatter face. The average brain size was 650 milliliters, so it's getting slightly bigger. There was a less prognathous face than apes. They had long arms and they made stone tools. So here we can see, the brain or the cranium is getting slightly larger. The face, the jaw here is less prognathous. So they were slightly more human-like than the previous. Right, then we're going to have a look at Homo erectus. And Homo erectus lived about 1.89 to 11.11 or 11,000 years ago. 100,000 years. And they were first found in Indonesia. However, their brain capacity, you can see, is a bit larger. They have a sloping forehead. The nose and jaws were wide. They had a large face, no chin, thick brow ridges, no cranial ridges. So can you see that there's a mix of ape and human? So they've got a sloping forehead, which is more ape-like. The jaws are more ape-like because they're wide. There's no chin, which is more ape-like. There's thick brow ridges, which is ape-like, but there are no cranial ridges, which is human-like. They had a human-like body, and the proportions were more human, and they developed tools, weapons, and fire, and they cooked their food. Okay, so that was Homo erectus. Then if we have a look here, we've got another star. So this is another group that we need to study and know well, and that is Homo naledi. And naledi means star. They lived between 335,000 to 236,000 years ago. So they were a more recent species. They were found at the cradle of humankind, which is in South Africa, and they were found in a cave known as the Rising Star, and they were found by Professor Lee Berger, and he found there were about plus minus 15,000 fossils found in this cave. The brain size, again, is not very big. It's slightly larger than Australopithecus, but it's still only between 460 and 610 cubic centimeters. The face was prognathous, so you can see they still had that protruding jaw. So if you have a look on the diagram here, but the slender body with wide hips, more human-like feet and hands, and they had long curved fingers. Right, then the next group that we're going to look at is known as Homo neanderthalensis. They were discovered in 1829 in Germany, in the Neander Valley, and they lived about 200,000 to about 30,000 years ago in Europe. So that's also a much more recent species than what we've had a look at before. Now the brain size was much larger. Okay, and there you can see that they've got a much larger cranium. They had thick brow ridges. The nose was broad and large. They were short and muscular. And they buried their dead, and they controlled fire. So they were able to use fire for whatever purpose, whether it was cooking or warming up, or heating. They lived in caves. They lived in Europe, where it can get quite cold in winter. So they were then able to, and then also by controlling fire, besides cooking their food, so besides cooking and for heat, it also extended daylight hours. So heat to keep warm, and then to extend daylight hours. Okay, because then they used it as light as well. And then we're going to come to the last group that is known as Homo sapiens, and once again we have a star, so this is also very important that you learn. And we see that Homo sapiens emerged about 200,000 years ago. Florisbad man was found by Dreyer in 1932 in the Free State. We also found examples at Makapansgat in Limpopo, in Border Cave in KwaZulu-Natal, in Blombos Cave in the Western Cape. The brain size was between 1,200 and 1,800 milliliters. They had a flat face, they had a defined chin, small teeth, a gently curved palate, rounded skull. They were bipedal, and they had shorter arms. And here in the diagram you can see very nicely where the cranial capacity is much greater. You can see there's a much larger forehead, and remember that's where the frontal lobe is, where your intelligence and your higher thinking and communication is situated.